in the Soto Zen tradition and other traditions, but particularly in the Soto Zen tradition, there are 16 precepts that if we decide we want to receive jukai or receive vows. Different for everyone. It's not necessary to do this to study. You can study these precepts without doing it formally. And I don't have a recommendation either way, other than don't do anything unless you have to. So if you don't have to, that's a good place to look. So you have to do this. Good place to look. That being said, it's a very good idea, and I do highly recommend that you read them and reflect on them a little bit and see how they are, how they sit with you. So there's the first three are basic refuge vows: Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Refuge in the Buddha, refuge in the Dharma, refuge in the Sangha. And the three pure precepts come next, just before the 10 grave precepts. So three pure precepts are basically the simplest way is don't do harm, do good, save all beings. So don't do harm. The way we need to look at this is through as how the three poisons pull us in this way and that way. When something occurs, we want to do something with it. We want to approve of it, we want to disapprove of it, or we want to ignore it or look away from it. So it seems that our mind, as it says in the Four Noble Truths, our mind wants to grasp or reject, and has a desire, simply put, to have things different than they are. So this is a situation that is often, rather than leading to some kind of slowing down and just seeing what's occurring, it seems to lead to some kind of ramping up and thinking more and figuring it out, like we often hear not only others say, but we hear ourselves say, I gotta figure this out. I shouldn't. We're always lecturing ourselves. You notice that? I'm sure you've noticed that. So a fancier way, there's different people, teachers over time have rephrased these. Like one of them is instead of saying not to do harm, it's not to do evil. Or I vow to refrain from all action that creates attachments. In other words, do no harm. And the next one in that same, by that same teacher, I don't have his or her name here. I vow to live in enlightenment. Or in other words, already Buddha. I vow to do good, already good, already. And I vow to save all beings. And I've added to that, to be with all things, including thoughts. So if you want to practice being with all things, you can start with one of the things that you're objecting to, agreeing with, and ignoring all the time, which are our thought patterns. We like what we're thinking. If you notice, there's kind of a little commentary there. We're thinking about something, and then we kind of double up and have a little commentary on that. Oh, that feels pretty good. I think I want to think about that more. Or that's good. I'm feeling pretty good. We kind of go back and forth and have little mini conversations with ourselves, approving, disapproving, agreeing with, and it takes some time for a meditator. This is one of the reasons we have these vows, is I call them glue. Glue yourself to this practice. You want to do this. You have a life. You have what do you have? 70, maybe 80 years, maybe more. You have the genes for it. Who knows? But while you're here, there's all kinds of things you can do with your life. Like what do you want to do with your life? How do you want to live? What do you want to go somewhere and with other people who are running around in circles and have a consensus reality where, yeah, this is good. We're doing the right thing. We're running in circles. Or do you want to stop and actually examine your own body, speech, mind, this whole matrix we call a human being. Do you want to really look at this and see what this is for yourself? Fundamentally, see what this is. As soon as you start doing that, all the spinning starts to slow down. It can get more painful because the spinning tends to take us out of the abrasiveness of things in our life. Suffering tends to doesn't eliminate it, but it helps us ignore it. It's like going to the carnival and getting on a tilt-a-whirl. You know, you ignore the whole thing until you get sick to your stomach and vomit, which rhymes with Halley's Comet. It was a joke I told earlier that wasn't very funny, but Shoka, one of the temple residents here, thought maybe we should compile a book of jokes. And I think that's not very funny. So another way of saying do no harm, do good, and save all beings is to say it in a different way, a different rather than something to be accomplished, say that it's already the case and say, I like this one. Wrong action does not arise. There's only the arising of benefit, and there's only the benefit of all beings. It's like always already the case. No, there's nothing to accomplish. I sometimes say along those same lines, what you're looking for, you're looking at. You don't have to go around the corner. You don't have to get better. You don't have to improve anything. Like Dogen says, I have to paraphrase him, but if I can, the Buddhas, I have to paraphrase, that Buddhas are someone who realizes the nature of delusion, realizes delusion, or are greatly aware of delusion are Buddhas. And someone who is, those who are greatly deluded about enlightenment are sentient beings. It's actually the case. There's nowhere to travel to. Sure. So the way we work on this is to see the way in which we can't quite do this. To see the way when something arises, instead of just meeting it where it's at, we take exception to it. We want it to be different. And what makes it so complicated is the story that comes along with this is something like, well, I can't just live with this. I mean, why would I do that? I'm not going to be a pushover. They can't treat me this way, or I deserve better, or the whole idea of blaming, the whole idea of finding fault so that you can kind of abandon your awareness, because the awareness doesn't really figure anything out. The awareness just sees, and the depth of that seeing, and in order for that to happen, the spinning has to slow down. And in order for the spinning to slow down, you have to see that you're spinning. You have to see the delusion. This is what the Buddha saw. He did not see rainbows, unicorns, and what are those little cakes in the kitchen called?
Puppy dogs.
Puppy dogs. He did not see those. He did not see delight, happiness, love, and so on. What he saw was suffering, and he saw delusion. He saw it here, and he saw it out there, and through seeing that, he also saw no separation. And of course, you know, lots of people who are practicing Buddhism are always saying what the Buddha meant, what the Buddha saw, blah, 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 blah. So I'm doing somewhat the same thing. On the other hand, and on the same hand, it's about coming out of what you understand or realize after practicing this path. So you have to, it's called Juyu Zanmai in the Zen tradition, self-realization, samadhi. You have to realize it. So that you know, you don't, you know, you're not going to say look back to the Buddha and say, I wonder if the Buddha would agree with me. I wonder if the Buddha would back me up on this. That's a good one. I'm saying something. I wonder if the Buddha would. Probably not. If he's the Buddha, he's not going to back you up. So 3 peer precepts. I don't know why they call them peer. Does anybody know? I feel that if you were to just contemplate those precepts, whether you receive Jukai or receive them formally in So Raksu or So robes, or become an official card-carrying Buddhist, I still feel like you could contemplate those, and because they're so simple. Don't do harm. How do you just not do harm? Just take the first one. First of all, stop meddling with everything based on your preconceptions. Because if you're not awake, then you're going to be living out of what you think is true. You're going to be living out of preconceptions that look real. So you'll be functioning out of that. So the idea is, hold your seat. That was interesting. So hold your seat and just observe what occurs. And if some kind of commentary arises with that, then don't object to that either. Don't do anything with it. And when you do that, what you're doing is you're actually beginning to clarify that area of your consciousness that is like water. It's like water. It's when you look into it, if you do anything with it, it immediately vibrates, and if there's silt in the bottom, that all comes up. It makes it more cloudy. So if you do anything to go into that area. On the other hand, if you just look at it, it tends to clear up, and it clears up in such a way that you see that even though something is occurring, nothing is really occurring. It's a difficult thing to talk about, because it's like saying, well, there's one of those Zen things again. It both is and it isn't, and it's, we're going back to Nagarjuna's tetralemma. So all of these, whether we're doing all of the forms, whether we're doing chanting the sutras, or following particular forms, or doing gasho to our cushion, or coming in the zendo, or bowing to each other, all of these forms have to do with strengthening the awareness that which sees. And so having those forms is in a non-theistic spiritual path is very much about seeing what is actually occurring, not if something that occurring is a right thing or a wrong thing, or a good thing or a bad thing. We're not saying there isn't great confusion going on, or that there isn't a lot of clarity happening. But to jump on board one or the other and jump on one and reject the other is warfare. Even when the story is relatively correct, well, I'm going to be on the side of the good and reject the evil or the bad. Questions at this point? Yes. Sokuzan.
What is, the way you see it, what is moderation?
I don't know if moderation, Sokuzan's asking what is moderation. I don't know if moderation is something you can do. And, just to use the word moderation, if we were to look it up in the dictionary, it'd be like, not too tight, not too loose. Just like the middle way teachings of the Buddha, the way the Buddha talked to the sitar player, was asking about how do I train my mind, and he said, according to stories, he said, how do you train? How do you work with your musical instrument? He said, how do you tune that? It's not too tight, not too loose. So it's a similar kind of situation. So if we're in each person, just think, just what's happened this morning. Just look at all of the things that have occurred in your mental situation, just the mind that no one else can see, as far as you know. That is like anything that occurs there is both of this world and not of this world. Everything that happens, if you If you like, the example I often give is there's a blue alligator in the kitchen, just because it's easy to remember that. So, but no, there isn't. But if I say, well, yes, there is, you may, depending on, and everyone would do this differently, depending on what, the causes and conditions that are arising. And when I say that, then I'm one of them. I'm a cause for something to occur in your, what we call the mind. Or not. You might say, no, I don't see an alligator. I see the shape in something in the shape of an alligator, but there's nothing in it. Because I refuse to do what you tell me to do. Transcendental stubbornness. So, but what I'm suggesting by that is that look how sensitive we are. I mean, look how sensitive the mind is. I can just say that, and you can have some kind of an index. You might, if you're extremely visual, you might actually see something like that. It might be sitting in a particular place. You might see the rest of the kitchen. You might see, it might be a little tiny alligator. It might be a gigantic one relative to the size of the cupboards, or it might be one so big that the cupboards are coming apart. And you're blaming me for making such a big alligator in your mind. And then I say, yeah, but it's not real. And so, well, it sure feels real. It's like a nightmare. Daymare. Yes, Jason.
Do you ever encourage any of your students to practice moderation?
I think the way that I don't think I use that word. I might. I don't recall using it. Usually what I say is to people is don't do anything unless you really have to do it. And that way, that's more about a conventional word is patience. Anything that is arising that's tempting you to do this or inviting you to do this, or your own thought patterns out of hope for things to be better or fear they're going to get worse, operating out of that modality, I say don't do anything. And then at some point, something will open up in some way where you really have to, it's not a matter of thinking about it. You see that you need to go do that. You need to go put that fire out, or you need to stop that person from whatever they're doing. And it won't necessarily come out of a thought process that is based on your self-centeredness and your desire for the fame and your fame and fortune. So I think it would show up as moderation, but moderation as a practice becomes conceptually based. Then you're starting to chat with yourself about what's moderation and what's not. And go ahead.
Well, isn't that the case with all of our practices?
Of course.
What makes moderation different?
What do you think?
I'm just trying to relate to what the things that I find myself wanting to compulsively overindulge in. Like a little bit's fine, but I can't do a little bit. I want a lot.
Well, like I overeat. But I can certainly blame the insulin. But on the other hand, it's I start eating and I like to eat. So whereas 20 years ago, 30 years ago, I rarely did that. So are you talking about something like that where you?
Yeah, I mean, nothing like harmful, but like if I'm at work and there's a plate of cookies out, I can't have one cookie. I need 6 cookies. I buy like half a gallon of ice cream. I can't have a bowl of ice cream. I need a half a gallon of ice cream.
So would I say to you, you should practice moderation and just have one cookie when that happens?
No, but I'm just wondering is there some of that stuff is, harmful to you. Is there a way to relate to it, not out of compulsion until you have the awareness to just function out of awareness?
No, that's a good question. The way it looks to me is I'm very hesitant to march into your territory, even though I'm functioning as, say, your teacher, to come into you and tell you things. And you've noticed from studying here for several years, and then being a monk, you've noticed that I wouldn't say I'm hands off, but I don't go into your territory and tell you directly, don't do this, do that, do that. A few cases, maybe. I think there's a couple areas where that's occurred. But usually I want you to experience your mind I want you to experience your negativity, your positivity, and even your eating cookies. You know, the value of what you just said relative to awareness, to me, is a lot more valuable, relatively speaking. Here's an evaluation, but it's based on you know, several decades of working with this, and what you're experiencing there, what you're going through there as you do that, and then what you'll do from asking about this. Then when you go back and see that plate of cookies again, it's not about control. I'm not saying that you couldn't start to control yourself and start to have successes. I could even tell you a way to do it. Make a list, start keeping track, and then you build up a credential. Not wrong. I'm not saying it's wrong to do that, but I'm more interested in people awakening to who they are, fundamentally awakening. And that may mean devouring one hell of a lot of cookies and looking at it. I'm not justifying that. But you're look what happens when your mind, when you do that. You're aware that you're doing that, and you keep doing it. Then your sitting practice is very strong. You're a strong meditator. You're very devoted to this practice. So your whole day is about awareness and about what's arising in awareness. I'm not trying to describe what's happening, but I know you well enough to make that comment. I think that you're very much about, how does this work? What is it? What should be done? What shouldn't be done? How can I look at something more deeply so I can really see what it is? And I would say that what you're saying there is, I wouldn't set up a protocol where, I'm only going to eat, if there's a plate of cookies out there, I'm eating one and that's it. That being said, if you feel like that, if that's what you need to do, then you will know it. But there might come a time when you will function that way. Is that helpful, or more?
Yeah, I have another question.
Certainly.
About again, what is the contrast between the control we use in practice and following the forms, or functioning, at least initially out of a complete conceptual understanding, and other forms outside of practice that why do we use control and concepts in one situation, whereas outside of the forms, it's not as helpful?
So if I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying there's a certain way we have things set up here and we follow that, and that's like your certain number of steps you take before you bow to the altar.
Well, yeah, and you said like moderation, if you arbitrarily apply that, you're just setting up a conceptual structure. It's not fundamentally helpful.
Mm-hmm.
But these forms are conceptually based initially for us, and what that contrast is.
I feel like I'm understanding what you're asking, and I think if I come back with more, I think it's going to create more concepts around the whole thing. But let me say it this way. If you set up a form, hold the form, unless you change it. And then whatever you change it to, then hold that form. So I'm saying you shouldn't. I'm not just like if you were to set up a form to do yoga, or if you're to set up a form to do like our brush and ink awareness practice, is very much a form that we get to see how we function. Like you never can do it right. The meditation practice is beginner's mind is sitting down every time, even though you're meditating for 20 or 30 years, sitting down and saying you can never. I mean, well, let's put it this way: you haven't so far, and it's been many, many years of meditating, and it's still not clear what's going on there. Still a beginner's mind. What is this? What is this situation fundamentally? So I think the awareness that you're bringing to that cookie situation, a lot of that is coming out of the forms that you're practicing here, the inquiry there. Would you say more about it? How does it look to you?
I mean, it's not. It's every aspect of my life, seeing areas where I just frivolously indulge in things and trying to understand.
But that's awareness. And what conventionally what people are trying to do is get control of that so they look better. So then when they look at themselves, they think of themselves as a better guy or girl because they no longer do that. Look at that self-control I got. Look, he walks over the cookie, picks up one, you're talking to yourself. He, meaning me, he walks over to the cookie and he eats one cookie. Even though he wants more, doesn't do that. He doesn't do that. So there's something in there that's a little fishy when it comes to trying to be good. When it talks about to do good, does not. If you're actually doing good, you'll be invisible. I'm not saying you might not, but you won't show up as good. Maybe a little bit, but not enough to get a big round of applause. So I think it's a very personal situation, but it's an extremely good question because you are bringing up, we're doing these forms, we need to do this, we should do this. I'm always looking at people's forms, how they're doing the shashu form and and I may or may not correct them. I may watch somebody do that wrong for months. When I say wrong, I'll say different than the way I feel it should be done. But it's more about the awareness of that. And the awareness of that shows up around how this person is relative to a form and how that person is relative to their following a form. It's extremely revealing. And when I say it's revealing, it's not revealing like information about someone. It's revealing very, very deep and very intimately about every person. You know what I'm saying? So it's extremely powerful. It looks to other people on the outside, if there is an outside, looking and say, oh, they're worshiping this guy, and they're all bowing down. Some people will come up and their self-centeredness and their belief and their fixation on what is true and what is not true, and their hope and fear is so empowered that they can't even walk in here and see what's going on here because their projections about it are so intense. They can't walk in and even look at it and say, well, this is kind of funny. Look what they're doing. So it's very good to look at all forms, and by following this form helps you see the other forms, making some cornbread, which, good job, by the way. Making some cornbread, going through the motion to do that, a certain way of doing that. It's a form. Very interesting area. Yes, sir.
The clarity and openness that comes from meditation, is that a form?
No, that's a concept. The clarity and openness that comes from meditation. Disagree with me. Go ahead.
No, I have another question about that.
Okay.
Is there a clarity and openness that comes from meditation?
Yes. And it's so different for each person relative to the way that the style in which they grasp or reject or accept their way of working with those three poisons is so personal. And it's so, you're not going to be able to correct yourself. I mean, you could spend your life correcting yourself and end up dying a corrected person. But awareness doesn't stop. Awareness has never started. It doesn't belong to anyone. That's why when someone awakens, they no longer have they might have opinions, but they don't, they're just temporary birds in the sky. There's not much going on in that. The fundamental nature is everything is so broken open that it's not like happiness. It's sometimes referred to as bliss. Because you see, there's basically no warfare anymore. There's nothing else to solve or do. There's no enemy to defeat. There's nothing to win over. there's just people suffering, and you help them, but you help them where they're at with their permission. You don't go in and apply your idea about how they should straighten up and, you know, do what you say. More.
Is awareness a form?
To use concepts to talk about it, awareness would be the space in which the forms occur. Awareness can sometimes, if awareness starts taking a form, this is called delusion. I think, I'm not sure. I'll have to check with my boss. Jesse.
What is an example of awareness taking a form?
It's when your awareness and your opinions, your ideas are glued together. It's like saying, have to almost act it out. It's like you're sitting talking to someone, and they start expressing themselves you know, that you can see that they just have opinions. They haven't investigated anything. They heard somebody else having a, and so they like that opinion, so they're going to think that way. It's like when you're 15, you either dislike your mom and dad and don't want to do that, or else there's the other role where you try to copy everything they do and be like them. And so an opinion would be a good example of something like, I think, you know, all Muslims are bad, or all Buddhists are bad, or all Christians are good, or some Christians are good, some Christians are bad. That's still an opinion. You don't know. An opinion is what you put in the space of not knowing. You can't stand to not know. But the very nature of awakening is not knowing. Because you can only know this. If you know this, you got it covered. But there's nothing to cover. Yes.
Is
I'll get to that.
Is not knowing a form of awareness?
Yeah. Yeah, if you don't mind. If you mind, then you got to put something in there because it feels like, won't I look bad if I don't know? What will people think of me not knowing stuff? I mean, aren't I supposed to know? Yes. Maria Bardoska's question from Toronto, she sent one in by email because she can't get through on the phone.
Yeah, earlier this week. And then there's a question from Kozan.
Oh, good.
This. Okay.
Either one.
So here's Maria's. In the moments when I am touched by real love, as it feels, it seems to me that my self-centeredness starts melting. There is just love. There is no self-satisfaction, self-gratification, etc. No need for any of it. Could you please talk about the power of love that transforms self-centeredness? Okay,
well, actually, love doesn't transform self-centeredness. Actual love in the form that I think she's talking about, or ultimate love, is like space. It's just, it completely accommodates everything. And it's not about a feeling. The love you feel, of course, is encouraging because you're feeling love and you're feeling your self-centeredness diminish. But you don't have to diminish your self-centeredness. It's unreal. I mean, it can be outrageously powerful and big and, you know, like a huge stuffed animal, 10 feet tall. It's not real. I don't care how big it is. It's not real. You don't have to get rid of it. And so with appreciation, Maria, for your question and the feeling, I understand what that feeling of the self-centeredness starting to evaporate or going away when you really feel that the surge of emotion or feeling towards fundamentally caring for everyone, for yourself, for others, and even making yourself second fiddle. And so that you really are starting to put others before yourself. So what I would say about it is that the higher reaches of that starts, but then to actually go beyond that, where there isn't actually, when there's no self, then there's no kind of a person who is feeling like they're selfless. Being selfless doesn't feel like you're selfless, because that would come and go. Impermanence. or the things come and go. That's more like what this is, and that's hard to get used to. It's hard to get used to not having a reference point. I don't know if you can, actually. So I don't know how good a job I did, Maria, responding to your question, but I would say just the idea is just to keep practicing so that you can actually see the nature of that emotion or that feeling or that what you're calling love arise, and don't do anything with it. Don't assume that it's valid. Don't assume that it's invalid. Do anything with it at all. When I say don't do anything with it at all, I know we're going to do something with it. But if I say don't do anything with it at all, and you try to do that, you'll see that you can't help it. We can't help but meddle with stuff. So I'm not trying to get you to particularly to stop meddling, because we can't. But that our awareness could come to some stage where we actually see what that is fundamentally. We actually see that plate full of cookies. And our relationship to it is completely direct and not separate. So then you may eat more cookies and you may not, but it'll come out of your awareness situation, not out of some kind of code of cookie eating that you've set up for yourself, and you've kept a little, have Post-it notes on your forehead. So, yes, goes on.
Okay, we just have a couple minutes left.
Yeah.
Before the daily Dharma gathering.
Yes.
Kozan's question is, how can the question, what is this, be used in a way that doesn't invite grasping what is sensed and reflexively recognized as this or that?
So your very question is already, it's answering itself, because all you have to do is see all of that. That's why we say what. We say what so that we can see the nature of the grasping, the nature. What was the tail end of that question? Or you can just read the whole thing over.
Okay. She says, how can the question, what is this, be used in a way that doesn't invite grasping what is sensed?
You don't have to worry about grasping what is sensed. Don't have to worry. All you have to do is say what. What is this? And if the grasping is there, look at what you're saying. You're actually aware that you're grasping what is sensed. Otherwise, you wouldn't really ask this question. So it's never about what you do or what arises. It's only about seeing that there is no solid being here. When that comes, then you can grasp, you can reject, you can eat cookies, you can not eat cookies. You may live, you may die, but it'll be in terms of a simple example of a big picture that doesn't leave anyone out, doesn't leave any heartbeat out anywhere. You may just start grasping like crazy. And other people around you might think, doesn't look like a very good monk to me. Look, he's grasping things. But it's the awareness that is primary. Whether you're right or wrong or grasp or reject or anything like that is not, of course, that's going to be part of the path. You're going to be seeing as you go along. And when you finally cave to your own awareness and stop following the dictates of your self-centered bullshit, when you cave to awareness, you actually are willing to be present, whatever is occurring. You're going to see some really difficult stuff. Up until that time, we're always looking at our preconceptions about how things should be, how they shouldn't be, who did this, who did that, that's right, that's wrong. We do that. We do it all the time. I spent years doing that until someone actually came and helped me cope. I don't even know if he helped me. He just functioned with me in such a way that I had to look this way more, and I wasn't doing it. So, very good question, but the correct question reveals how much you've been saying, what is this? What is this? It reveals that, because that's what starts to show up when you ask that. And you could say, or I could say, or we all could say, what's the value of that? Because the value is you begin to penetrate deeply into something down in it. It does not feel good. It does not feel good to look and see how full of, what's the word? Full of shit that you are. It doesn't feel good to do that. So we want to get out to kind of make ourselves less grasping or less confused or less. There's people all over meditation teachings all over the place that talk in a different way than we're talking about it. We're actually talking about, we're trying to see who is this and who is that, trying to see what it is. And I'm not here to promote it other than to say it's empty of a self. But that's not something to believe, that's something to see yourself. And when you see it, you might realize, well, that's not exactly what I thought it was going to be. There's a whole lot more animation going on in that emptiness. It's time. It is time. It is time to, we're going to do the daily Dharma gathering in 15 more minutes. Anyone in the Zen that wants to stay for that, we'll be back here. I'm going to talk about what?
What is permanent?
What is permanent? I can't wait to hear what I say. We can dedicate the merit, yes.
Awareness penetrate into all places so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Ji-o-san, Shi-Shi-Hu, Shi-Son, Mu-Sa, Ho-Ho-Sa, Moko-Ja-Ho-Ro-Mi. The 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna, Paramita,